Greetings and a warm digital welcome to the International Conference on Communication, Management and Humanities. It is an absolute pleasure to stand before you in this virtual realm where we come together as a global community to share, learn, and spark new ideas. While the pixels on our screen might be separating us physically, our collective passion for knowledge unites us in a powerful way. I am both honored and excited to be here as a presenter, sharing my thoughts on the laws of marital rape in Malaysia with all of you together with my co-author Dr. Ramalingam. Now, let us begin with a question essential to the topic of our discussion today. Can a woman be raped by a husband? To answer this, it is important that we look at the laws in Malaysia and several other jurisdictions, such as the United States and Scotland, which will be discussed in the presentation today. Before we move any further, it is important to define what is a woman, or rather, who is a woman or a wife. So, according to Blackstone, by marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of woman is expanded during the marriage, or at the least is incorporated and consolidated into that of the husband, under whose wing protection and cover she performs everything, and is therefore called in our law of French a femme covert femme in vivo. Or in other words, a wife is said to be the covert baron or under the protection and influence of her husband. Her baron or lord and her condition during marriage is called coverture. On laws pertaining to rape in Malaysia, Section 375 of the Penal Code, which defines the offence, reads, "A man is said to commit rape who, except in the case hereinafter, has sexual intercourse with a woman under the circumstances falling under any of the following description. A. Against her will, without her consent, or with her consent, but when that consent is obtained by using his position of authority over her or because of a professional relationship, and with or without her consent when she is under 16 years of age." Not only that, the exception to Section 375 reads, "A sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife by a marriage which is valid under any written law for the time being in force, or moving on to the rationale federation as valid is not rape. Earlier, this is followed by exceptions wherein a woman who has a under the penal code order is an inherited provision from an era where the UDHR and the recognition of women as human beings to be accorded rights had yet to penetrate the fabric and structure of a living separately from a husband during the period of male dominated bias under this section. The immunity given to a husband for marital rape is based on the concept of property that when a woman enters into a marriage contract, she consents to sexual intercourse and is unable to retract that consent. Of death or this position has undergone a change due to the changing societal roles and power balance within the hierarchical social structure, and more importantly, due to the recognition that humans, irrespective of gender, are entitled to equal human rights and human dignity. This is what underlies the UDHR among other right documents. And marital rape has also been affirmed in the case of RVR, which was heard in the Court of Appeal by Lord Lane CJ, which he states that a rapist remains a rapist subject to the criminal law, irrespective of his relationship with his victim. Considering the immunity for marital rape stands no longer in the country of its origin in light of societal development and the recognition of the rights of women, but we, on the other hand, slavishly follow a law that is behind its time. And we can see that this is not in line with the principle that exists today in the Constitution of Malaysia and the international and regional commitment to which Malaysia has subscribed to. And moving on to the United States, marital rape prior to the 1970s was legal in every US state. It was partially outlawed in Michigan and Delaware in 1974, then wholly outlawed in South Dakota and Nebraska in 1975. The court case Oregon against Rideout in 1978 was the first in which someone stood trial for raping his spouse while they lived together. By 1993, marital rape was a crime nationwide, and still in the 1990s, most states continued to differentiate between the way marital rape and non-marital rape were viewed and treated. So, after 1993, there were changes in all states, where in some states, courts have struck down the marital exemption as unconstitutional. In the 1984 New York Court of Appeal case of People against Libertad, Judge Sol Washler stated that a marriage license should not be viewed as a license for a husband to forcibly rape his wife with impunity. A married woman has the same right to control her own body as does an unmarried woman. Similarly, in Alabama, The marital exemptions from the sodomy law, which can be seen in the case of Williams against State, and from the rape law, which can be seen in the case of Merton against State, were found to be unconstitutional. And by 1993, all states had withdrawn the marital rape exemptions, and the last states to do so being Oklahoma and North Carolina. And in both 1993, the exemption had been declared judicially to be unconstitutional. Though laws had changed in every state by 1993, in only 17 states was marital rape treated the same as non-marital rape. And in the other states, there continued to be significant differences in the way marital rape and non-marital rape were treated, such as less severe penalties or excluding situations where no violence is used or shorter reporting periods. Moving on to laws pertaining to marital rape in Scotland, we must first look at the history of it, where the views which contributed to rape laws not being applicable in marriage can be traced at least partially to the 17th century English common law, which was then imported to other British colonies. The 17th century English jurist Sir Matthew Hale stated his position of the common law in the history of the Pleas of the Crown, where a husband cannot be guilty of a rape committed by himself upon his lawful wife, for by their mutual matrimonial consent and contract that the wife has given up herself in this kind to her husband, which she cannot retract. However, later in Scotland, the High Court of Justiciary took a different view, where they abolished marital immunity. And this can be seen in the case of S against HM Advocate in 1989. And the same also happened in England and Wales in 1991 in the case of R against R. And very soon after this, in Australia, at the end of 1991 in the case of R against L, the High Court of Australia ruled the same, ruling that if the common law exemption had ever been part of the Australian law, it no longer was. Now, looking at the case of R against R, which seems to be a landmark case in this, it was the first occasion where the marital rights exemption had been appealed as far as the House of Lords, and it followed the trio of cases since 1988 where the marital rights exemption was held to exist. The leading judgment, unanimously approved, was given by Lord Keith of Kinkle. He stated that the contortions being performed in the lower courts in order to avoid applying the marital rights exemption were indicative of the absurdity of the rule, and held, agreeing with earlier judgments in Scotland and in the Court of Appeal in R against R, that the fiction of implied consent has no useful purpose to serve today in the law of rape. To answer our initial question, can a woman be raped by a husband? Sadly, the answer is a woman cannot be raped by a husband under Malaysian law. Therefore, there is a need to reform the bias in law caused by imbalances of power based on male dominance. The recognition of every person's human dignity in all international documents and Malaysia's federal constitution speak to the bodily integrity of an individual, human rights, and the recognition of gender equality. There is a need to remove the legal shackles and discrimination that are based upon the cultural and societal stereotypes promoting male power dominance of a bygone era which regarded women as property. It is the contention that Section 375, exception and explanations, and Section 375A, as they stand, are in conflict with the Federal Constitution. Malaysia's state responsibilities under international and regional human rights instruments, and also Islamic principles. It is thus subject to the challenge of unconstitutionality and is liable to be struck out. Hence, the recommendation is as follows: that the Penal Code be amended by deleting the exceptions and explanations to Section 375 and Section 375A. That is all from me. Thank you very much.